WEFUNK. We funk.
But could have given you tracks from any one of those shows. However, I am giving you the second edition of Big LW's Jammin World Podcast Eyewitness Account Concert Review. A concert review from a man who was there to witness the bizarre world of Frank Zappa hologram tour experience that was debuted to the world at the Capitol Theater in Portchester with your boy Big L. Big L! Well, Big LW anyway, proudly in attendance. And again, it was one of the highlights, dating all the way back to episode number 1. It was one of my highlight in my "What's Next" in the year 2019 segment that I gave you all the way in the first week of January. I was super stoked for the impending I guess at that point it had just been announced. Dates not announced, but officially announced that the bizarre world of Frank Zappa hologram tour was officially hitting the road, and beyond excited when I found out that the debut performance was going to be taking place at the legendary Capitol Theater up in Portchester, New York. And I just knew your boy Big L had to be there, and I just knew that it would be the perfect show to give an eyewitness account, concert review. So without further and no more ado-ing, we will get into the concert experience, because this was more than just a mere concert here, folks, all right? This was a whole psychedelic experience taking place in 3 dimensions, mind you. But I guess we will kind of get into that in a minute here, as I do want to, I guess we need to kind of start off with the experience by talking a little bit about the ride up there, and I guess really more importantly, but where exactly we were going. Like I mentioned, so excited when the concert tour was announced to be taking its debut at the Capitol Theater up in Portchester, which I referred to moments ago as legendary, and especially in the New York City jam community. Legendary is really the exact right word to use for the venue. It's really the crown jewel in the whole Peter Shapiro booking campaign. In the Capitol Theater is a venue that I have spoken really relentlessly about in every episode so far. I talk about shows that take place at the Cap, and the Capitol Theater is really the New York City home to the jam scene on a theater level, especially where you get, a close to 2,000 person capacity with a lot, more freedom, and I'm sure a lot more financially lucrative deals to the bands than you would get from any of the New York City equivalent sized theaters, where dealing with the Madison Square Garden Company, for example, who owns the Beacon Theater, to get, an 1,800 or 2,000 person show for yourself would be an absolute nightmare compared to dealing with Peter Shapiro and getting yourself booked at the Capitol Theater, which is comfortably located, a super easy 45-minute train ride north of New York in the Westchester County suburbs of Portchester. But owned by Peter Shapiro, like I mentioned, who as well, I should just point out for listeners of the show, he's another name that constantly gets repeated and is really the unmatched king of the New York City jam scene. since his days as the owner and promoter of the Wetlands Preserve, which is one of New York City's all-time most famous and successful jam clubs, with early shows of Fish and Mo and, Panic and just every, Blues Traveler and Spin Doctors when they were a thing. And really it was the absolute who's who of the 1990s jam scene here in New York City was the Wetlands Preserve, owned by Shapiro. Actually closed down, interestingly enough, September 10th, 2001. Hosted its going away party and the closing party of the Wetlands Preserve. Hours later, of course, was the morning of September 11th, 2001, and the world changed forever after that. And it was not for another 10 years or so that Peter Shapiro would eventually reopen up the iconic Capitol Theater. In between, Peter Shapiro opened up the Brooklyn Bowl, which has really become one of the it has been ranked as one of the best rock clubs in the country, and it has become extremely influential and innovative in a lot of ways, as it does literally double as a bowling alley during the day, turned into a rock club at night, and really just with the connections of Peter Shapiro is able to get so many bookings outside of its capacity. Like I just mentioned, 2 nights of Trey earlier this month, Phil's, really just everybody's played there. They've hosted 2 different charity, and campaign functions for the Clinton family, as both Bill and Hillary have hosted various events at the Brooklyn Bowl, which has really hosted just and really that is inside New York City. That is the undisputed home base of the jam scene. And then on a slightly bigger level is Peter Shapiro's theater, located outside of New York. And then the Brooklyn Bowl has really has already the kind of the rock club bowling alley concept. Peter Shapiro has already opened up a very successful Brooklyn Bowl in Vegas, with this year alone more coming to, I think, Nashville and Philly are both opening up Brooklyn Bowl outposts, as well as there is a huge grand opening of a Peter Shapiro venue in Chicago, Garcia's, which I will get into, which is actually a bar connected and associated with the Capitol Theater in Portchester, co-owned with Peter Shapiro and the Jerry Garcia estate. So officially, owned by the estate of Jerry, owns the Garcia, co-owns the Garcia's property with Peter Shapiro, and I believe that same deal will be opening up for a major music venue in Chicago. Not sure. I believe it's kind of, a bigger capacity rock club performance space without a bowling alley, you know what I mean? So it's not like the other, concept that Peter Shapiro's owned. But anyway, huge years for Peter Shapiro, who has been the king of New York bookings. Peter Shapiro is also the main promoter of the whole Fare Thee Well concert experience at Soldiers Field in Chicago over 4th of July weekend in 2015, pairing Trey with the surviving members of the Grateful Dead, really kickstarting this huge resurgence of popularity for the Grateful Dead, and the now mega tour with Bob Weir and John Mayer and Dead & Co. that is now in its 3rd, full summer, and I'd say they're probably close to 10 major stadium amphitheater tours in, with Bob and John really got all started, the reemergence of popularity with the band with that weekend in Chicago, and all put together by Peter Shapiro, who has so much reach. He really is the most influential promoter in the jam scene, and now going cross-country with venues all over the place. But here in New York City, where is his home, he has his 2 legendary, iconic venues of varying sizes, his rock club in Brooklyn and his theater up in Portchester, which, so I guess that takes care of the man that owns the place. Now, to give you a long-winded, boring explanation of the theater itself, Okay, but the Capitol Theater, long before Peter Shapiro took it over, was already a pretty, legendary venue for itself there in Westchester. After originally opening up in 1923, okay, it boasted to have at the time the only theater refrigeration system in all of Westchester. Was the big claim to fame for the 2,000 person capacity theater that in the time of the 20s it hosted, actual silent films and some theatrical performances, but for the most part was used as an actual, what we would consider a cinema theater, okay? But by the 60s or 70s, it had kind of changed into a live music venue, okay, as the silent film era died and the live music era came alive in the 60s and 70s, and it really became a very, very successful and a popular New York City market rock club to go, hosting shows from Pink Floyd, P-Funk, Traffic, of course, famous shows from the Allman Brothers Band, as well as Janis Joplin and the Big Brother Holding Company, as well, of course, most notably, all of the famous shows from the Grateful Dead, who in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, made the Capitol Theater one of their real home bases here in New York City. Of course, then after the closing of the Bill Graham Fillmore East here in New York, it became even much more of the Grateful Dead's New York City home. And as the Grateful Dead are so monumentally beloved in the scene, ever since those days, the Capitol Theater has really grown to be an extremely important and significant place in the jam community, just being the home base of the Grateful Dead in the early 70s, hosting so many great Dead shows and so many important Grateful Dead shows, most notably those February of 71 shows where the Dead played. I think 6 or 7 shows at the Capitol Theater over a run where they really, really transitioned their sound from the psychedelic blues, the Pigpen-led psychedelic blues act that they were of the late 60s into the more psychedelic folk act that they kind of emerged into in the early 70s, and during that run they debuted just a crazy number of what went on to be classic Dead songs, as you saw the debuts of Bertha and Wharf Rat and just tons of amazing songs, including the Dead debut of Birdsong, all right, which is, of course, the tribute to Janis Joplin, who passed away. Of course, Janis Joplin herself, who was no stranger to the Capitol Theater. Janis actually debuted her classic Mercedes-Benz. Lord, won't you have me? Mercedes-Benz was actually debuted at the Cap, and then just about a year later, Jerry led the Grateful Dead through the Janis tribute Birdsong after her passing, in a very emotional moment for the Grateful Dead and for everybody in attendance, as Janis and the Grateful Dead were so synonymous with each other at that time. They toured together, and of course the relation with Pigpen and Janis, and Jerry and Janis, of course, the whole band, and Janis and her whole team. It was kind of, they were all part of the same San Francisco scene and all so close. And it was a very special moment when, a legendary moment in the Grateful Dead history with the whole debut of Birdsong at the Cap in February of 70. One of just, like I mentioned, a whole handful of debuts that went on during that run, and really ever since then, as well as all of the other shows played there as well. But the Capitol Theater had the real reputation as one of the all-time classic New York City jam venues, I guess really right up there with Bill Graham's Fillmore East, that is now a bank, so you can't really pay its proper love and affection as you can the Capitol Theater, which after hosting all those shows, like I said, and garnering this, just historic reputation on the scene, didn't necessarily lead to much financial success, as just years after those epic Grateful Dead shows, the Capitol Theater actually would close its doors for about 10 years, and apparently, just wear and tear in the venue, and apparently the venue got overtaken by like pigeons and stray cats, as is an often problem with these big venues. When they go unused, nature takes over, and there was roof damage from rain, and then all sorts of wildlife took up homes there, and it was years of renovations trying to get the Cap reopened. It did open up in the 80s actually as an event space where they would host weddings and catering gigs. Not till the 90s that they started rocking again, and Fish, Blues Traveler, Panic all played there in the early 90s. MTV actually filmed a Live from the 10 live music series at the Cap, which featured performances from a little band named the Rolling Stones, and a young gentleman named David Bowie. Hello. The Stones and Bowie both played at the Cap in 97. But kind of lingered there with its great reputation until Peter Shapiro took it over in 2011 and invested millions of dollars updating the stage facility and redecorating it into the heady palace that it is now, equipped with super psychedelic dome spotlight features and really high-end, musical production equipment going down in there. It's, like I keep on mentioning, the premier, rock jam venue in New York City, opening with an epic concert from another up-and-coming aspiring artist named Bob Dylan. Opened the place up in 2012. I think it was just that year, a year after it hosted an epic 10-night run from Further. Right, Willie Nelson and Neil Young, the Black Crowes and the Roots. Just last year alone, okay, Bob Weir and Trey both brought their solo projects. Panic, Tedeschi Trucks, Chris Robinson Brotherhood, My Morning Jacket, J-Rad, Phil about a million times have all played there. Just in the year, in between 2018 and 2019, actually, all of those acts will have played the Panic. Some of them more than once. So we'll have played the Cap. Some of them more than once. So needless to say, just a beyond epic history at the Capitol Theater, with the whole town of Portchester as well. A bunch of sweet little Mexican restaurants that have Jerry Garcia hands and Grateful Dead bears and turtles all over the place. So you get a super heady feel from some of the local establishments, and then from other local establishments, a super authentic Mexican feel. But a bunch of sweet little spots in a super cool little town up there in Portchester, surrounding the Capitol Theater, where once again we took the pilgrimage up. However, this time to see more than just a mere concert, to experience the bizarre world of Frank Zappa in three-dimensional hologram form. And so excited for the show. I was just to see what the hell was going to happen, as this was one of those tours that really finally came to fruition after like years of rumors and logistical stuff. First of all, there was the whole if you followed the Zappa family trust and their and the Zappa family feuds that are going on. This tour was a long time in the making, with lots of family infighting and logistical problems between a couple of Frank's sons, Dweezil and Ahmet, most notably. This tour is being put on by Ahmet, who is pretty much in control of the Zappa family trust with Frank's daughters Moonbeam. So it's pretty much Moonbeam and Ahmet that run the Frank Zappa family trust, while the other sibling, Dweezil, is he kind of goes out on his own and plays lots of Frank Zappa tribute shows. Obviously, kind of pegged into the Frank Zappa hole is Dweezil Zappa. However, he was I think initially supposed to take part, of course, in this whole Zappa bizarre world of Frank Zappa experience. However, years of infighting between Ahmet and Dweezil. Most notably, there was a big lawsuit where Ahmet and Moonbeam actually sued Dweezil, who was on tour under a Zappa Plays Zappa tour, where Dweezil was like aggressively touring with all Frank Zappa material, and then his brother and sister Ahmet and Moonbeam sued him for that. That kind of led to Dweezil pulling out of the bizarre world of Frank Zappa hologram experience. However, moving on, as planned by Ahmet, who plans, hoping for over 100 show world tour. As there will be shows already. I think there's already shows booked in the UK, but they're taking this one across the globe because the far corners of the world need to experience the bizarre world of Frank Zappa. And I think they would really lose their shit if you brought this one to like the Congo as well, and you all of a sudden start subjecting them to a three-dimensional hologram of a shirtless Zappa noodling around for a guitar for 30 minutes on it. But we're starting here at the cap, and then of course I will as well just finish off. The tour is being put on, I guess, by the partner company Illusion. Okay, which they are the ones that are actually putting on the whole hologram part of this tour, where Illusion, they're the company I guess first heard from years ago with the epic Tupac hologram at Coachella, which was a big surprise, featured that year's Coachella, and then all the talk about the Tupac hologram, and then the ensuing hologram concerts, the potential of ensuing a hologram concerts to be put on. Since then, it's been years of them, quote unquote, perfecting the technology. Last year, I guess they did kind of give a little bit more of a soft release with a Ronnie James Dio hologram experience tour. Which fell upon deaf ears. Now, I don't know how wide of a tour that was. I don't remember hearing about it. So I don't think it was like as quite of a big production as this Frank Zappa hologram tour. As well, Illusions has, quote unquote, claimed to have finally really feel like they've perfected the technology for a widespread tour, which is definitely the most exciting part of this tour. Given the fact, like I said, Dweezil is already out there. If you want to get your Zappa fix, you get either Dweezil or the Zappa Family Trust. Pretty much put on a Zappa related show, once a year at least in your given city. But the hologram portion of this tour is what really makes it the bizarre world experience and gives it that extra, that no pun intended, but that third dimension of entertainment and really just psychedelic atmosphere that you're gonna want to check out at a Zappa show, where maybe sometimes Dweezil just doesn't have the pure stage presence and charisma a la Frank, and enough to necessarily hold down the entertainment value for a big major tour. So a big psychedelic mindfuck visual experience would definitely help with the weird music being played by Frank, who is of course one of the real innovative guitar improv jam kind of just alt guitar rock kind of guys, where he was very untraditional with his guitar stylings. That was the early kind of career of Frank Zappa. Then Zappa really kind of took a more turn into just like literal weirdness, and I guess literary weirdness, where he really kind of then became on to really towards the later part of his career really just like with just like a lot of intention in mind, but went out to kind of push the boundaries of censorship, making all sorts of just very weird, sexually graphic, and just really just like altogether weird, lyrical tracks with all sorts of, psychotic imagery and, like I said, depraved sexual content, really with just the intention in mind to push the boundaries of censorship. And then we're talking like, the mid-'80s, we'll call it. He then kind of became like a champion for anti-censorship, as, especially kind of then towards the late 80s, especially with, when rap came out with, the NWA and, the parents, whatever the George Bush kind of fronted parents council against, entertaining things movement kind of started, and mainstream pop culture was really starting to get shackled by censorship more. It was up to Frank Zappa to lead the charge against that censorship. So because of that, a lot of his more famous songs, Yellow Snow and a lot of the Joe's Garage album, and just a lot of his catalog was really kind of more synonymous with just weird, with just really being weird in general. I'd say weird guitar stylings, although at time absolutely sensational. Like he's as talented of a guitar player as there ever was. However, really tried to kind of focus his style on being more alternative and untraditional. Think Henrik's severely dosed up and like warming up, as opposed to jamming out. But that's kind of like almost more what Frank reminded me of with a lot of his guitar stylings. And then, like I said, the content of his lyrics were equally alternative and ridiculous in their own way. So really just an all-around bizarre guy and a bizarre musical performance, as he was definitely as well known for just giving very almost narrative-based performances where he's up there kind of noodling, jamming out on solo guitar while telling kind of long-winded weird stories at times and all sorts of, not your traditional rock star, we'll just say. So perfectly fitting for a not-so-traditional rock show experience, which is where all of the visual boards and the three-dimensional hologram, like I said, really add so much to the Zappa show, and then as well, just out of the sheer interest to see what exactly is this hologram going to be. Is it going to be revolutionary and mind-blowing, or is it going to be hilariously cheesy? Let's go up to the Capitol Theater and find out. And I guess even just to continue the explanation of the show, though, of what we're going to see. So lots of visual psychedelic imagery corresponding with Frank Zappa's music. However, this is not just merely a Frank Zappa, the Frank Zappa recording going down. Oh, no. This is, it's actually a Frank Zappa recording going down, coinciding with a full live band consisting of Mothers of Invention and Frank Zappa longtime collaborators playing along live with a recorded hologram version of Frank Zappa. Okay, I guess to kind of then take it one level deeper, however, for the Frank Zappa stuff. So I guess the Zappa Family Trust, like I said, took all of the footage for the Frank Zappa material used for this concert is called from a 1974 recording studio session where I guess there was Frank played lots of studio recording sessions where he kind of turned his recording studio into a live performance space and was recording these weird live performances to no audience in his actual physical recording space. However, they took on much more of a mock live performance feel where he's literally doing live narratives and doing crowd shout outs while performing to nobody in essence. So they kind of synced up and cut out clips of Frank jamming from a 1974 unreleased recording sessions, and then paired that with his live backing band going down. Okay, and the band itself was pretty sick. Like I said, consisting of Frank Zappa band members. You got Ray White, Mike Canely, Scott Toons, Robert Martin, and Ed Mann, all playing along live. Okay. As well, I should point out, it was the first out of my probably 50 shows or whatever that I've been up to the Cap. It was my first ever seated show at the Capitol Theater, where the GA floor had seats, temporary seats put in, and was a seated orchestra at the GA Capitol Theater, which added a different kind of atmosphere for seated orchestra kind of shows. There's tends to be kind of a little bit more attention being paid. You're all kind of sitting there focusing as opposed to standing around dancing, and kind of, when it's a standing GA, takes on kind of a more crowded rock club, rowdy kind of feel, as opposed to a seated orchestra where it's a little bit more focused on the show. So that kind of did, I'd say, add to, especially when you got your tickets the second they went on sale and you're sitting 8th row center. It definitely took on a bigger than life kind of feel, as well, like I mentioned, with the stage ultra decked out, where I guess the stage was kind of the actual physical Capitol Theater stage was topped by a maybe 24-inch LED screen panel. Okay, that then the band was on top of the LED panel, surrounded by pretty much 3 huge jumbotrons surrounding a 4th mini, maybe 10 foot by 10 foot or so, another video board in the middle, which is where the hologram projection would live primarily, and then that was surrounded by 3 huge other jumbo boards. So it was like an IMAX movie experience. As well, the LED paneling underneath the band, which was corresponding video with the rest of the boards, all took on a fully encompassing visual feel for the live band that were pretty much playing in a movie at this point. So visually a total home run, I'd say. From the a Zappa stage setup, okay, and I guess that'll finally kick off with the concert itself, okay, with which opened up with the pretty epic Cosmic Debris. All right, got right down to biz as the Frank Zappa hologram came to life and greeted the crowd, okay, with our first experience of the Frank Zappa hologram, which right off the bat, little bit underwhelming. First of all, not as big as I was hoping, as it was probably roughly the size of what Frank Zappa would have been, you know, if not a little smaller. I was hoping for more of like a Back to the Future 2, when they went to the future and they were living in Biff's, in the glorious world of Biff. And they went to the movies and they saw Jaws 3D, and this fucking Jaws came right out of the screen and practically bit stupid Marty's head off. That is what I was hoping for Zappa. I was hoping for a huge three-dimensional Zappa hologram. Instead, it was pretty much more like a huge kind of, you know, to scale size Guitar Hero image. Okay, that I guess was technically three-dimensional because the board behind it was, you know what I mean, you could tell he was in the foreground of whatever video presentation was going on behind him. However, but he was not really three-dimensional in terms of, you know, like a human three-dimensional projection, you know. So that was kind of the first your first taste of the hologram, okay, which then, however, went away for most of the first set. Okay, so the hologram, which was another big surprise, but the hologram did not stay out there and jam with the band for the entire 2-hour performance. He kind of sporadically came and went for, you know, when appropriate. All right. However, so when it was not Frank Zappa hologram being projected at you, you really had to rely on these super cool psychedelic vignettes, kind of, that were playing, corresponding with the song in a very like Pink Floyd and Wizard of Oz style, you know, level of corresponding video to the music, but super, super cool video presentations for that matter, okay? As More Trouble Every Day had an amazing video presentation with kind of like newspapers scrolling with all sorts of crazy headlines, and Zappa's up there noodling away. And there would, of course, be interspersed with the actual footage of Zappa jamming out from the 74 studio session that we're talking about, okay? The Penguins in Bondage video was hilarious. And all of the video presentation were super cool and appropriate to the songs, like I said. Finally got back to the hologram for a Dynamo hum, full on with backup, with now three-dimensional backup dancers as well, as Frank got some hologram guests to come and help out with the Dynamo hum, which kind of closed out the main set. All right. I guess other highlights were Why Does It Hurt When I Pee, Peaches and Regalia, and Apostrophe were all other main set highlights without hologram projections. I guess maybe Peaches had a hologram projection, but Apostrophe and Why Does It Hurt When I Pee both had pretty sick corresponding videos going out. All right. So I guess it was at this point where Ahmet finally came out and did a live public greeting. I guess it was kind of like a cringy, like AC lounge act kind of, where he was like half roasting the band while giving them credit, where he's like, y'all know Ray, he's the worst guitar player. It's Ray tonight, and it was just very like cringe-worthy. Like I said, it just really felt like it was like you were watching like a bad Atlantic City lounge act bombing horribly. But I guess that was kind of a part of the Frank Zappa live experience. Like I said, is he did go through a very long band introduction phase where he gave boring narratives about each guy. So that was, I guess, that was Ahmet's part, and I guess this really being Ahmet's brainchild and labor of love for so long, you did get to get the personal Zappa family trust touch on the evening with Ahmet coming out. And I guess he even did like sing a couple. I guess he did lead vocals on a couple numbers as well in between. So I guess it was kind of, if performed better, if Ahmed wasn't such a dislikable character, it might have been a better kind of band intro. This was, of course, the first show, the first of what he claims to be hundreds of dates this year alone. So maybe he will get a little bit more comfortable with the band announcements. However, at the Cap, you were kind of waiting for him to get the hell off stage so the Zappa hologram could get the hell back on stage. But finally he did. He left the stage, closing out the show, leaving us with just the epic Frank Zappa hologram encore, okay, which of course featured a pretty epic hot dog man themed vignette for cheapins. Followed by Zappa classic Camarillo Brillo to close things out, with the Frank Zappa hologram personally thanking the crowd for coming and joining him tonight and letting us know that he can't wait to see us again. And with that, the Frank Zappa hologram experience came to an end. I guess all in all, my ultimate thoughts of the Frank hologram show, absolutely loved it. And had an amazing time at the Capitol Theater, like I always do. But super, super fun, enjoyable show, I would say. With the music of Frank Zappa, more than enough to keep you entertained, and the psychedelic video imagery. Definitely a super cool addition and, a third psychedelic element towards the show, where it definitely added a very, very unique factor. And like I said, the video's all very song appropriate and logical, and it really just made sense as a show. The whole presentation really just made sense and came across real enjoyable, especially if you're a fan of the Frank Zappa musical catalog. I think it's a pretty surefire fun night of bizarre Frank Zappa experiences. Okay, that's a positive, and I guess that is my overall feelings of the show. Super solid, had a great time. Okay, I suppose from a negative standpoint, however, just to critique a little bit, give you some of my thoughts about the some of the negative sides. Is, I guess, just really not enough hologram, where it was kind of, and I guess it did kind of shift a little bit from being promoted as the bizarre world of Frank Zappa experience, where at first it was really like the Frank Zappa hologram experience. Then I guess even in marketing alone, they did kind of downplay the hologram, where it was not necessarily promoted as a straight up hologram show, and it definitely was not that. As like I said, for probably like a 2-hour set, the hologram was maybe out there for like 30 minutes. I would say no more than 25% of the show, however, included the Frank Zappa hologram. All right, I guess to even further comment on that, however, not necessarily the worst thing, because I guess from another negative standpoint, but the hologram itself was just a little bit underwhelming. Okay, and I guess from eye illusion's standpoint, they have perfected the three-dimensional hologram in the fact that they have made it exist. However, they have not perfected it in the fact that they have made it like mind-blowing or revolutionary cool. You know, the hologram itself was definitely not something that I would run back to see, nor was I really, tell anybody that I was super impressed with. Like I said, it was way more Princess Leia and Obi-Wan Kenobi than it was Jaws 3D in Back to the Future 2, like I mentioned. But it was definitely not like a modern CGI-based three-dimensional visual experience. I imagine that you would see way more cool psychedelic, 3D kind of imagery at like a Gorillaz show, who of course this is like, and I guess really I've never seen a live Gorillaz show, although I guess this whole thing is probably very influenced by the stage setup at a Gorillaz show and just the visual experience that the Gorillaz are so known to put on, where their entire stage show is this kind of animated thing. And I think that they probably come at you without eye illusion, just with their CGI stage video presentation, probably come together with more cool three-dimensional kind of elements than the Frank Zappa hologram experience even did. And that's from the visual aspect. I guess from the musical aspect, a really super cool show, and really an amazing job of the live band playing with the pre-recorded material. Really came across seamlessly and very obviously well rehearsed, but super cool element to be going back and forth between live instrumentalists and the video presentation. However, I suppose, I guess, just to pick apart the musical aspect, again, if you're going to see, it's not really a beginner's Frank Zappa show from the standpoint where, you kind of promote it as this bizarre world of Frank Zappa hologram experience. You're going to figure they're going to be playing all the hits, kind of like a best of Frank Zappa show, with a hologram presentation, putting it over the top. But you kind of would figure that they had the entire catalog of Frank Zappa material to choose from. However, not being the case, taking all of the footage from this 1974 recording studio session, which is, I guess, right of the time of Apostrophe, so you did get a lot of Apostrophe songs. However, this is pre Joe's Garage or Chic Your Booty or some of the other classic Zappa albums. So the set list potentially could leave a little bit to be desired, just because it's halfway through his catalog, chronologically. So you're missing out on some big hits there. However, all in all, super cool show, super fun, as promoted, bizarre experience, celebrating Frank Zappa, and like I said, just a real unique and fun and interesting way to see a show and to celebrate a night of Frank Zappa. In a major upgrade from having to pay money to see Dweezil. So you got to see the real deal as close as you could, and you definitely got to experience something absolutely as bizarre as the man himself. So a good time was had by all at the Capitol Theater. Good times and dos tamales. We will be seeing you for Phil and Friends soon, I'm sure. But with all of that was the second edition of Big LW's Jammin World podcast, eyewitness account concert review, a concert review from someone who was actually there to witness it. So, and as well,
Big F! W-E-F-U-N-K. We funk.